You already know what to do. You've thought about it, planned it, promised yourself you'd start, but you didn't. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack potential, but because something keeps stopping you in that exact moment when action is required. Hesitation, overthinking, waiting for the right time, and that moment never comes. This is where most people stay stuck, not in lack of knowledge, but in lack of execution. This audiobook is about breaking that pattern immediately. Not tomorrow, not later. Now, you're going to learn how to move without waiting for motivation, how to act before your mind talks you out of it, and how to turn decisions into instant execution. Because success doesn't come from knowing. It comes from doing, fast, consistently, and without hesitation. And once you master that, everything changes. Chapter 1. The real reason you don't take action. You don't have a time problem. You don't have a knowledge problem. And you definitely don't have a potential problem. You have an action problem. And the real reason you don't take action is not what you think. Most people believe they're waiting for motivation. They think, once I feel ready, I'll start. Once I'm inspired, I'll take action. But that's a lie your mind tells you. Because motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It shows up when things feel easy and disappears the moment things feel difficult. So if you rely on motivation, you will always be inconsistent. The truth is much deeper. You don't take action because your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort, from uncertainty, from effort. Every time you're about to do something important, something that requires focus, discipline, or risk, your brain sees it as a threat. Not a physical threat, but a mental one. Something unfamiliar, something uncomfortable. And your brain's job is to keep you safe. So it does what it's designed to do. It stops you. It creates hesitation. It fills your mind with thoughts like, I'll do it later. I'm not ready yet. Let me think about it more. These thoughts feel logical. They feel reasonable, but they're not truth. They are resistance. Another major reason you don't take action is overthinking. You analyze too much. You try to plan everything perfectly. You want certainty before you begin. But action does not come from perfect clarity. It comes from movement. And overthinking kills movement. Because the more you think, the more doubts appear. What if this doesn't work? What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? And suddenly, doing nothing feels safer than doing something. So you wait, and waiting becomes a habit. Another hidden reason is fear of discomfort. Action is uncomfortable. Starting is uncomfortable. Focusing is uncomfortable. Pushing yourself is uncomfortable. So your mind looks for easier options. Scrolling, watching, delaying. Anything that gives you instant relief. And the more you choose comfort, the harder action becomes. Because you train your brain to avoid effort. There is also the issue of identity. If you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, delays, or struggles with discipline, your actions will reflect that. Because your behavior always aligns with how you see yourself, even if you want to change. So when it's time to act, you hesitate. Not because you can't act, but because it doesn't match your identity. And that creates resistance. Another powerful factor is lack of urgency. You think you have time. You believe you can do it later, tomorrow, next week, next month. But later is where action goes to die. Because later removes pressure. And without pressure, there's no movement. Everything feels optional. And when everything is optional, nothing gets done. There's also the problem of starting too big. You set goals that feel overwhelming. Huge tasks, massive expectations. And when something feels too big, your brain resists it. Because it looks difficult, complicated, time-consuming. So instead of starting small, you avoid it completely. And avoidance becomes your default. But here's the truth. You are not lazy. You are not incapable. You are not lacking discipline. You are simply trapped in a pattern of hesitation, overthinking, avoidance, and comfort. And patterns can be changed, but only if you understand them. Because once you see what's really happening, you stop blaming yourself, and you start taking control. You realize that action is not about feeling ready. It's about moving despite, not feeling ready. It's about acting before your mind creates excuses. It's about breaking the pattern immediately, because the longer you wait, the stronger the resistance becomes. And the faster you act, the weaker it gets. So the goal is simple. Interrupt the pattern. The moment you feel hesitation, move. The moment you start overthinking, act. The moment you want to delay, start. Because action kills resistance. And resistance is what's been holding you back. Everything you want, progress, success, results, exists on the other side of action. Not thinking, not planning, not waiting. Action. So if you want to change your life, don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for the perfect moment. And don't wait to feel ready, because you'll be waiting forever. Instead, understand this. The moment you act, you take control. And the more you act, the easier it becomes. Because action is not something you wait for. It is something you create. And once you realize that, everything changes. You stop hesitating. You stop delaying. You stop waiting. And you start moving. Immediately. Chapter 2. Destroying procrastination at the root. Procrastination is not laziness. It's a strategy, a mental escape, a way for your brain to avoid discomfort while convincing you it's justified. That's why it feels so natural, so easy, so logical. I'll do it later. I just need a little more time. I'll start when I feel ready. These thoughts feel harmless, but they're the exact reason you stay stuck. Because procrastination is not about time. It's about avoidance. You're not delaying because you don't have time. You are delaying because the task feels uncomfortable, difficult, uncertain, and your brain wants relief. So it gives you an alternative, something easier, something familiar, something that feels good right now. Scrolling, watching, thinking instead of doing. And in that moment, you feel better. You feel relief. But that relief comes at a cost, because the task is still there, waiting, growing heavier, becoming more stressful. So the next time you think about it, it feels even harder, and the cycle repeats. This is how procrastination traps you, not by stopping you once, but by repeating the pattern over and over again. To destroy procrastination, you must attack it at the root, not the surface, not just the behavior, but the cause. The first cause is emotional resistance. Every task carries an emotion. Some feel easy, others feel uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable the task, the more resistance you feel. And the more resistance you feel, the more likely you are to delay. So the solution is not to eliminate discomfort. That's impossible. The solution is to act despite it, to train yourself to move even when it feels hard. Because once you start, something changes. The resistance drops. The task becomes easier, and momentum begins. But you must break the first barrier. The second root cause is lack of clarity. If you don't know exactly what to do, you won't start. Vague tasks create hesitation. Work on my goals. Be productive. Get things done. These are not clear, and your brain resists what it doesn't understand. So you must make your actions specific. What exactly will you do? Where will you start? What's the first step? Clarity removes friction. And when friction is low, action becomes easier. Another major cause is overwhelm. When something feels too big, your brain shuts down. It looks at the entire task and decides it's too much. So instead of starting small, you do nothing. This is where most people fail. They think they need to do everything at once. But action doesn't work that way. You don't need to finish. You need to begin. Break the task down. Make it small. So small that it feels easy to start. Because once you start, progress follows. Another powerful cause is lack of urgency. When something feels optional, it gets delayed. When something feels important but not immediate, you push it aside. This is why deadlines work. They create pressure, and pressure forces action. So if you want to stop procrastinating, you must create urgency. Set clear deadlines. Limit your time. Decide that it must be done now, not later. Because later is where procrastination lives. There is also the problem of perfectionism. Want to do things perfectly, waiting for the right conditions, the right plan, the right moment. But perfection is just another form of procrastination. Because it delays action, you don't need perfect. You need progress. You need movement. Because action creates improvement, and improvement leads to better results. Another hidden cause is reward imbalance. Your brain prefers instant rewards over delayed ones. Watching a video gives immediate satisfaction. Scrolling gives instant pleasure. But working toward a goal gives delayed rewards. So your brain naturally chooses the easier option. Unless you take control, you must train yourself to value long-term results over short-term comfort, to see the bigger picture, to understand that what feels good now may cost you later, and what feels hard now may reward you later. Another important factor is habit. Procrastination is not just a one-time action. It's a repeated behavior, and repeated behavior becomes automatic. You delay without thinking. You avoid without realizing. It becomes your default response. And breaking that requires awareness. You must catch yourself in the moment. Notice when you're about to delay and interrupt it immediately. This is where control begins. So how do you destroy procrastination? You don't wait for motivation. You don't try to feel ready. You act fast. Before your brain has time to create excuses, you simplify the task. You make it clear. You reduce it to the smallest step. And you begin. No hesitation, no overthinking, just movement. Because action is the cure. Not thinking, not planning, not waiting. Action. Every time you act instead of delay, you weaken the pattern. And every time you delay, you strengthen it. So the choice is simple. Reinforce procrastination or destroy it, moment by moment, decision by decision. Because procrastination is not permanent. It is a habit, and habits can be broken, but only through action. Immediate, consistent, unavoidable action. And once you break that pattern, something powerful happens. You stop delaying. You stop avoiding. You stop waiting. And you become someone who moves. Without hesitation. Without excuses. Without delay. And that is when everything starts to change. Chapter 3. Act before you feel ready. One of the biggest lies you've been told is this. You need to feel ready before you take action. It sounds reasonable. It feels logical. But it's completely wrong. Because if you wait until you feel ready, you will wait forever. Readiness is not a requirement for action. It is a result of action. This is where most people get stuck. They wait for confidence. They wait for clarity. They wait for the perfect moment. But those things don't come first. They come after you start. Confidence is built through doing. Clarity is created through movement. Momentum is formed through repetition. Not thinking, not planning, not waiting. Action. The truth is, you'll almost never feel ready to do something that matters. Starting something new is uncomfortable. Taking a risk is uncomfortable. Pushing yourself is uncomfortable. And your brain will always try to delay it. It will tell you, just wait a little longer. Prepare a bit more. Think it through again. But these are not solutions. They're delays. Because the moment you feel resistance is the exact moment you need to act. That's the signal. Not to stop, but to move. Another reason you wait is fear. Fear of failure. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of not being good enough. And these fears feel real. They feel powerful. But they are based on imagination, not reality. You are afraid of something that hasn't even happened yet. So you delay action to avoid that feeling. But avoidance does not remove fear. It strengthens it. Because every time you avoid, you teach your brain that fear is something to obey. And the next time, it becomes even stronger. The only way to break fear is through action. Not big action. Not perfect action. Just action. Because when you act, you prove to yourself that you can handle it. You reduce uncertainty. You gain experience. And slowly, fear loses its power. Another trap is overpreparation. You think you need more knowledge, more planning, more time. But preparation can become a form of procrastination. You convince yourself you're being productive. But in reality, you're avoiding the real work. Because real work involves action, not just thinking. There's a point where preparation stops helping and starts delaying. And most people stay in that phase too long. They get ready, but never start. Another powerful truth is this. You don't need the full plan. You only need the first step. Clarity comes from movement, not from sitting still. When you start, you learn. When you learn, you adjust. And when you adjust, you improve. This is how progress actually works. Step by step, not all at once. So instead of asking, "Am I ready?" ask, "What is the smallest action I can take right now?" And then do it immediately, because speed matters. The longer you wait, the more your mind interferes. The more excuses it creates. The more resistance builds. But when you act quickly, you bypass that resistance. You move before doubt has time to grow. This is a skill. And like any skill, it can be trained. Start practicing immediate action. When you think of something you need to do it. When you feel hesitation, move anyway. When your mind says later, say now. At first, it will feel unnatural, uncomfortable. But that's the point. You are breaking an old pattern and creating a new one. Another important shift is letting go of perfection. You will not get it right the first time. You will make mistakes. You will feel uncertain. But that is part of the process. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Because imperfect action will always beat perfect inaction. Every time. There's also power in momentum. Once you start, it becomes easier to continue. The hardest part is the beginning. The first step. After that, things begin to flow. Your focus increases. Your energy shifts. And what felt difficult becomes manageable. But you must get past that first barrier. And the only way to do that is to act immediately. So understand this clearly. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You don't need to feel motivated. You need to move. Because action creates everything you are waiting for. It creates clarity. It builds confidence. It generates momentum. So stop waiting. Stop preparing endlessly. Stop thinking you need more time. Because the moment you act, everything begins to change. And the more you act, the easier it becomes. Until one day, you no longer hesitate. You no longer delay. You no longer wait to feel ready. You simply move. And that is when you become unstoppable. Chapter 4. Killing overthinking and acting fast. Overthinking feels productive. It feels like you're being careful. Like you're making smart decisions. Like you're preparing yourself for success. But in reality, overthinking is one of the biggest reasons you stay stuck. Because while you're thinking, nothing is happening. No progress. No movement. No results. Just thoughts. Endless loops of analysis that lead nowhere. Overthinking is not a thinking problem. It's an action avoidance problem. You think more because you're not acting. And the more you think, the harder it becomes to act. Because every thought creates another doubt. Another question. Another reason to wait. What if this doesn't work? What if I fail? What if there's a better way? And suddenly, a simple decision becomes complicated, heavy, overwhelming. So you delay, and that delay reinforces the habit. The truth is, clarity does not come from thinking more. It comes from doing. You can sit for hours trying to figure out the perfect plan, or you could take one step and learn more in minutes than you would in hours of thinking. Action reveals information. Thinking only creates possibilities. And possibilities can trap you. Because when you see too many options, you hesitate. You become unsure. And uncertainty leads to inaction. This is known as decision paralysis. Too many choices. Too many outcomes. Too much thinking. Not enough doing. So how do you break it? You simplify. You reduce everything to the next action. Not the full plan. Not the perfect strategy. Just the next step. Because the next step is always clear if you force yourself to see it. Another powerful way to kill overthinking is speed. Slow thinking creates doubt. Fast action kills it. When you move quickly, you don't give your brain time to create excuses. You don't allow fear to build. You act before hesitation grows. This is why successful people often move fast, not because they have all the answers, but because they understand that speed creates momentum, and momentum creates results. Another key is setting limits. If you give yourself unlimited time to think, you will use all of it, and more. So you must create boundaries. Decide quickly. Act immediately. Give yourself a short window to think, and then move. Because thinking without limits leads to delay, but thinking with limits leads to action. There is also the habit of trusting yourself. Overthinking often comes from lack of trust. You don't trust your decisions, so you keep analyzing, rechecking, doubting. But confidence is not built before action. It is built through action. Every time you decide and act, you strengthen trust in yourself. And the more you trust yourself, the less you overthink. Another important shift is accepting mistakes. You're going to make them. That's not a possibility, it's a certainty. But mistakes are not failures. They are feedback. They show you what works and what doesn't. But if you overthink to avoid mistakes, you also avoid progress. Because progress requires action, and action includes errors. So instead of trying to avoid mistakes, learn from them. Move forward. Adjust. Improve. This is how growth happens. Another powerful technique is reducing input. The more information you consume, the more you think. The more opinions you hear, the more confused you become. And confusion leads to inaction. So limit unnecessary input. Focus on what matters, and then act. Because information is only useful when applied. Otherwise, it becomes noise. There's also the concept of action bias. This means training yourself to default to action. Instead of thinking first, you act first. Instead of analyzing deeply, you move quickly. You shift from, let me think about it, let me try it. This changes everything. Because now, your default is movement, not hesitation. And over time, this becomes automatic. So when you face a decision, you don't freeze. You act immediately. Another important truth is this. You don't need certainty to act. You need direction, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not complete, because direction allows movement, and movement creates clarity. Waiting for certainty creates delay, and delay creates stagnation. So stop trying to figure everything out. Start moving, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, because imperfect action will always lead to better results than perfect thinking. So understand this clearly. Overthinking is not helping you. It is holding you back. It is creating delay. It is draining your energy, and it is keeping you stuck. The solution is simple, but not easy. Act faster. Think less. Move immediately. Because the moment you shift from thinking to doing, everything changes. You gain clarity. You build confidence. You create momentum. And momentum is what drives results. So the next time you catch yourself overthinking, do one thing. Stop and act right away. Because action is the only thing that breaks the cycle. And once you break it, you take control. And once you take control, you stop being someone who hesitates and become someone who executes. Fast. Chapter 5. Building instant discipline without motivation. Motivation is unreliable. Some days you feel it. Most days you don't. And if you depend on motivation to take action, your progress will always be inconsistent. You'll start strong, then slow down, then stop. Not because you don't care, but because the feeling disappeared. This is why discipline matters more than motivation. Because discipline doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on what you decide. Discipline is action without emotion, action without negotiation, action without delay. And the powerful part is this. Discipline can be built instantly. Not perfectly, but immediately. Most people think discipline takes months or years to develop. But that's not true. Discipline starts in a single moment. The moment you choose to act instead of delay. The moment you say, I do it now. No discussion. No excuses. No waiting. That is discipline. And every time you repeat that choice, you strengthen it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is negotiating with themselves. I'll start in 10 minutes. I'll do it later. Let me just finish this first. These small negotiations seem harmless, but they weaken discipline because every time you delay, you train your brain to ignore action. And once that pattern is built, it becomes automatic. So the rule is simple. No negotiation. When it's time to act immediately. Another powerful principle is reducing decisions. The more decisions you have to make, the easier it is to delay. What should I do first? When should I start? How should I do it? These questions create friction, and friction leads to procrastination. So remove it. Decide in advance. Plan your actions before the moment arrives. So when it's time, there is no thinking, only execution. This is how disciplined people operate. They don't decide in the moment. They follow a system. There is also the concept of starting small. Discipline does not mean doing everything at once. It means doing something consistently, even if it's small, even if it feels insignificant, because consistency builds identity, and identity drives behavior. If you act daily, you become someone who takes action. And once that identity is built, discipline becomes natural. Another important factor is environment. Your surroundings influence your behavior. If your environment is full of distractions, discipline becomes harder. If everything around you encourages comfort, you will choose comfort. So you must design your environment. Remove distractions. Create a space that supports action. Make it easier to focus. Because discipline is not just internal. It is also external. Another key is immediate action. The faster you act, the less resistance you feel. Delay increases difficulty. Speed reduces it. So train yourself to move quickly. When you think of something you need to do, start, even if it's just for a minute. Because starting is the hardest part. Once you begin, momentum takes over. There is also the importance of repetition. Discipline is not built in one moment. It is built through repeated action. Every time you act, you strengthen the pattern. Every time you delay, you weaken it. So the goal is not perfection. It is consistency. Show up, act, repeat, again and again. Another powerful shift is separating feelings from actions. You will not always feel like doing the work. You will feel tired, unmotivated, distracted. But those feelings do not matter. Because discipline is not based on feelings. It is based on decisions. You decide, and then you act, no matter how you feel. This is what separates those who succeed from those who don't. They act regardless of emotion. There's also the idea of accountability. When you hold yourself accountable, your actions improve. You take responsibility. You follow through. You don't allow yourself to make excuses, because you understand that every action or lack of action has consequences. Another important concept is identity. Discipline is easier when it becomes part of who you are. Not something you force, but something you do naturally. You don't say, I'm trying to be disciplined. You say, I am disciplined. And your actions align with that identity. Because behavior follows belief. So you must start seeing yourself differently. As someone who acts. As someone who follows through. As someone who does what needs to be done. And then prove it through action. Daily. Moment by moment. Because identity is built through evidence. Every action is proof. So what does all this mean? It means you don't need motivation to take action. You need a system, a decision, a commitment to act immediately. Because discipline is not something you wait for. It is something you create. Right now, in this moment, by choosing action over delay, again and again, until it becomes automatic, until it becomes who you are. And once that happens, everything changes. You stop hesitating. You stop procrastinating. You stop waiting. And you become someone who moves. Consistently. Powerfully. Without excuses. And that is when real progress begins. Chapter 6. Turning decisions into immediate execution. Most people make decisions. Very few execute them. That's the gap. You decide to wake up early, but you don't. You decide to start, but you delay. You decide to change, but nothing happens. So the problem is not decision-making. It's execution. Because a decision without action is just an idea. And ideas don't change your life. Execution does. This is where you must shift from deciding to doing immediately. Because the longer the gap between decision and action, the weaker that decision becomes. And the stronger your excuses become. The moment you decide to do something, there's a small window, a short moment where your intention is strong, clear, focused. But if you don't act within that window, your brain takes over. It introduces doubt, delay, distraction, and the decision fades. So the rule is simple. Close the gap. The moment you decide, act. Even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Because immediate action locks in the decision. It turns intention into reality. Another powerful concept is reducing friction. Friction is anything that makes action harder. Too many steps, too many decisions, too much effort to begin. And the more friction there is, the more likely you are to delay. So you must simplify. Make it easy to start. Remove unnecessary steps. Prepare in advance. So when it's time to act, there is nothing stopping you. Only movement. There's also the idea of the first move. You don't need to complete the entire task. You just need to begin. Open the document. Start the work. Take the first step. Because the first move breaks resistance. And once resistance is broken, continuation becomes easier. Another key is eliminating hesitation triggers. Notice what causes you to delay. Is it your phone? Distractions? Unclear tasks? Fatigue? Identify those triggers and remove them, because execution requires focus, and focus requires control. Another important factor is speed. Speed kills hesitation. The faster you act, the less time your brain has to interfere. So build the habit of moving quickly. Decide, act. No pause. No delay. No second-guessing. This may feel uncomfortable at first, but that's because you're used to hesitation, and you are now breaking that pattern. There is also the principle of commitment. When you decide something, treat it as final. Not optional. Not flexible. Final. Because when decisions are optional, execution becomes optional. And when execution is optional, it rarely happens. So raise your standard. When you decide, you follow through. No matter what. Another powerful shift is focusing on identity. You are not someone who tries. You are someone who executes. You don't say, I'll try to do it. You say, I will do it. And then you prove it through action. Because identity drives behavior. And behavior creates results. Another key is consistency. Execution is not about one action. It is about repeated action. Daily. Moment by moment. Decision by decision. Because consistency builds trust. Trust in yourself. And when you trust yourself, execution becomes easier. Another important idea is eliminating backup plans for action. Not in life, but in execution. When it's time to act, there is no alternative. No, I'll do it later. No, maybe tomorrow. Only now. Because options create delay. And removing options creates action. There's also the importance of energy. Execution requires focus. And focus requires energy. If you're constantly tired, distracted, or overwhelmed, action becomes harder. So you must manage your energy. Rest when needed. Focus when it matters. Because execution is easier when your mind is clear. Another powerful principle is accountability. When you hold yourself accountable, your actions improve. You follow through. You stay consistent. Because you understand that your results depend on your execution, not your intentions. So what does all this mean? It means your life is not shaped by what you decide. It is shaped by what you execute. Because decisions are easy. Execution is hard. But execution is what creates results. So if you want to change your life, you must close the gap between thinking and doing, between deciding and acting immediately. Because the moment you act, everything changes. You gain momentum. You build confidence. You create progress. And progress creates results. So stop collecting decisions. Start executing them right away. Because action is the only thing that turns your plans into reality. And once you master execution, you stop being someone who thinks about change and become someone who creates it. Chapter 7. Eliminating distractions and taking back control. You don't lack time. You lack control over your attention. Because every day, your focus is being pulled in different directions. Notifications, social media, messages, endless content designed to keep you watching, scrolling, and consuming. And the more your attention is divided, the harder it becomes to take action. Because action requires focus, and focus is being stolen. This is one of the biggest hidden reasons you don't execute. Not because you can't, but because you're constantly distracted. And distraction is not harmless. It is expensive. Every time you switch your attention, you lose momentum. Every time you check your phone, you reset your focus. Every time you interrupt your work, you delay progress. And these small interruptions add up. They destroy your ability to go deep, to think clearly, to act consistently. This is why you feel busy, but not productive. You're doing things, but not the things that move your life forward. Another problem is that distractions are addictive. They are designed to give you instant rewards, quick dopamine hits, short bursts of pleasure, and your brain begins to prefer them. Because they are easy, they require no effort, no discipline. So when it's time to do something important, something that requires focus, you feel resistance. Not because the task is impossible, but because your brain is used to easier rewards. And anything that requires effort feels harder than it should. This is how distraction weakens action. It trains your mind to avoid effort and choose comfort. There's also the illusion of just a minute. I'll check this quickly. I'll scroll for a bit. But a minute turns into 10. 10 turns into an hour. And suddenly, the time you had for action is gone. This is how opportunities are lost. Not in big moments, but in small, repeated distractions. Another hidden issue is fragmented attention. When your mind is constantly switching, it loses depth. You cannot focus fully. You cannot think clearly. You cannot execute effectively. And without deep focus, meaningful progress becomes impossible. So if you want to take action immediately, you must protect your attention aggressively, because attention is your most valuable resource, more valuable than time. Because without attention, time is wasted. The first step is awareness. Notice where your attention goes, how often you check your phone, how easily you get distracted, how quickly you lose focus. Because once you see it, you can change it. The second step is elimination. Remove unnecessary distractions. Turn off notifications. Limit access to things that pull your attention away. Create boundaries. Because discipline alone is not enough. You must design your environment. Another powerful strategy is creating focus blocks. Periods of time where you work without interruption. No phone, no distractions, just focused action. Even 30 minutes of deep focus can produce more results than hours of distracted effort. Because depth creates progress. Another key is controlling your inputs. What you consume affects how you think, and how you think affects how you act. If you constantly consume distractions, your mind becomes scattered. If you consume intentionally, your mind becomes focused. So be selective. Choose what you allow into your mind, because it shapes your behavior. Another important factor is replacing distraction with action. Don't just remove distractions. Fill that space with something productive. Because if you leave a gap, your mind will return to old habits. So when you feel the urge to scroll or check something unnecessary, redirect that energy. Start a task. Take action, even something small. Because action weakens distraction, and repetition builds control. There's also the importance of boredom. Most people can't handle it. They need constant stimulation, constant input. But boredom is powerful because it creates space for focus, for thinking, for action. When you remove distractions, you will feel bored at first. That's normal. That's your brain adjusting. Stay with it, because on the other side of boredom is clarity, and clarity leads to action. Another key shift is valuing your time. Understand that every distraction has a cost. Every minute lost is a minute not invested in your future. And when you start seeing time this way, your behavior changes. You become more intentional, more selective, more focused, because now your time has value. So what does all this mean? It means if you want to take action immediately, you must take control of your attention. Because without control, you will always be pulled away, always distracted, always delayed. But when you control your attention, everything changes. You focus better. You act faster. You execute consistently. And that is what creates results. So eliminate distractions. Protect your focus. Take back control. Because your ability to act depends on your ability to focus. And once you master that, you stop being someone who is easily distracted and become someone who gets things done fast, consistently, without interruption. Chapter 8. Creating momentum that carries you forward. Starting is hard, but staying consistent is harder. Because even after you take action once, you can still stop. You can still fall back. You can still lose progress. This is why most people struggle. They start strong. They feel motivated. They take action, and then they slow down. They lose focus. They stop, not because they can't continue, but because they never built momentum. Momentum is what turns effort into consistency. It's what makes action easier over time. It's what carries you forward, even when you don't feel like moving. And without it, everything feels heavy, forced, difficult. So the goal is not just to start. The goal is to build momentum. Because once you have it, everything changes. Momentum begins with small wins. Not big ones. Not perfect ones. Small, simple, achievable actions that you can complete quickly. Because every completed action creates progress. And progress creates motivation. This is important. Motivation does not create action. Action creates motivation. So instead of waiting to feel motivated, you create it through movement. You act. You complete something. You see progress. And that progress fuels you to continue. This is how momentum builds. Another key factor is consistency. Momentum is not built through intensity. It is built through repetition. Doing something once does not create momentum. Doing it daily does. Even if it's small. Even if it feels insignificant. Because consistency compounds. Every action adds to the next. And over time, those actions create flow. A rhythm. A pattern of behavior that becomes automatic. This is when things start to feel easier. Not because the work changed, but because you did. Another powerful element is removing gaps. Momentum breaks when you stop. When you skip too many days. When you delay too often. Because every pause resets your progress. And starting again becomes harder. So protect your streak. Keep moving. Even if it's small. Even if it's minimal. Because maintaining momentum is easier than rebuilding it. There's also the importance of visible progress. When you can see your progress, you stay motivated. When you can't, you lose interest. So track your actions, not just results. Because results take time, but actions happen daily. And when you see yourself showing up, you build confidence. You build belief. And belief strengthens momentum. Another key is reducing resistance. The easier it is to act, the more likely you are to continue. So simplify your process. Remove unnecessary steps. Make it easy to begin. Because friction kills momentum, and simplicity sustains it. There's also the role of identity. Momentum is not just about what you do. It's about who you become. When you act consistently, you start to see yourself differently. As someone who shows up. As someone who executes. As someone who follows through. And that identity reinforces your behavior. Because now, action is not something you force. It's something you do, naturally. Another powerful factor is energy. Momentum requires energy. If you're constantly drained, distracted, or overwhelmed, it becomes harder to maintain. So you must manage your energy. Rest when needed. Focus when it matters. Balance effort with recovery. Because sustainable momentum is not about burning out. It's about maintaining flow. Another important truth is this. Momentum reduces effort. At the beginning, everything feels hard. Starting is difficult. Continuing is difficult. But once momentum builds, things feel lighter. You think less. You hesitate less. You act faster. Because your brain is now trained for action. This is where real progress happens. Not in the beginning, but after momentum takes over. So how do you build it? You start small. You act daily. You track your progress. You protect your consistency. And you keep moving, no matter what. Because momentum is fragile at first, but powerful over time. And once it's strong, it carries you. Even on days when you don't feel like moving. Even when motivation is low. Even when things feel difficult. So understand this clearly. Your goal is not just to act once. It is to create a pattern of action, a rhythm, a system that keeps you moving forward. Because once you have momentum, you no longer rely on motivation. You rely on movement, and movement creates results. So build it, protect it, strengthen it, because momentum is what turns effort into progress, and progress into success. And once you have it, you become unstoppable. Chapter 9. Mastering Focus, the Secret Weapon of Action. Action without focus is wasted effort. You can work all day, move constantly, and check tasks off a list. But if your attention is scattered, results remain minimal. Focus is the force multiplier of action. It turns small efforts into meaningful outcomes. It turns ordinary work into extraordinary progress. It separates those who drift from those who achieve. Most people struggle with focus because the mind is naturally restless. Distractions are everywhere. Notifications, social media, emails, chats, endless options, and your brain craves stimulation. So it jumps from one thing to another, chasing novelty, avoiding discomfort, escaping boredom. Without intentional focus, action becomes reactive. You respond to whatever is loudest or easiest instead of what matters most. The first step to mastering focus is clarity. When your mind knows exactly what to do and why, it resists distraction more effectively. Vague goals invite procrastination. Specific, meaningful objectives demand attention. You must define what matters most today, this week, this month. Prioritize ruthlessly. Focus requires boundaries. This is why multitasking is a myth. Your brain cannot truly handle multiple important tasks at once. Switching drains energy, slows progress, and reduces the quality of your work. So do one thing at a time. Immerse yourself fully. Push distractions aside. Protect your attention like it's a valuable asset, because it is. Another crucial factor is environment. Your surroundings affect your focus more than most people realize. Cluttered spaces, noisy rooms, and constant digital interruptions drain mental energy. Simplify your environment. Remove temptations. Create a space that signals work, action, progress. Focus is also a skill, not a trait. It can be trained. Start with short, dedicated periods of attention. The Pomodoro method or time blocking can be effective. Gradually increase the duration as your ability grows. The more you practice, the more your mind adapts. Another powerful method is energy management. Focus is fueled by energy, not just willpower. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and breaks all determine how well you can sustain attention. Neglect these, and no amount of discipline will compensate. Momentum and focus reinforce each other. Focused action builds progress, and progress strengthens focus. Every completed task fuels motivation and attention for the next one. Conversely, distractions erode momentum and dilute results. Another secret weapon is elimination. Not just prioritization, but removal. Say no to anything that does not serve your goals. Cut unnecessary commitments. Declutter your schedule, your digital life, and your mind. Focus thrives on simplicity. One of the most overlooked keys is identity. When you see yourself as a person who acts with attention and purpose, focus becomes natural. Your identity drives behavior. Someone who identifies as disciplined, focused, and action-oriented automatically avoids distractions. Another hidden factor is purpose. When your work connects to something bigger than immediate tasks, focus deepens. The more meaningful the action, the easier it is to stay engaged. Finally, review and reflection are critical. Regularly assess where your attention goes. Notice patterns of distraction. Make adjustments. Incremental improvements in focus compound into massive results over time. So to master focus, define your priorities, protect your attention, train your mind, manage your energy, simplify your environment, align your work with purpose, reinforce identity. Focus is not just a tool. It is the engine of action. Without it, effort is scattered, progress is slow, and success is delayed. With it, every move matters. Every action counts. Every day brings tangible progress. Focus transforms ordinary effort into unstoppable momentum, and it is the ultimate lever for taking immediate action. Chapter 10. Taking action until it becomes automatic. Knowing what to do is not enough. Planning is useless without execution. The ultimate difference between those who achieve and those who only dream is simple. They act. They act consistently. They act until action becomes a habit. The first step is starting before you feel ready. Waiting for motivation or perfect conditions is the enemy of progress. Action creates clarity, momentum, and confidence. Once you begin, the path reveals itself. Momentum is the most underrated tool for success. Every completed task fuels the next. Every small win compounds into bigger victories. But to leverage momentum, you must act consistently. Even small steps, taken daily, accumulate massive results over time. Consistency turns action into a pattern. Patterns become habits. Habits become identity. When acting is part of who you are, procrastination loses power. The task no longer feels optional. It becomes automatic. One key strategy is micro-action. Break every task into the tiniest step possible. Do just enough to start. Starting is more important than finishing, because starting triggers action and reduces resistance. Another strategy is the 2-minute rule. If it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. The brain resists large, vague tasks but responds to small, immediate steps. Action breeds action. The more you act, the easier it becomes to act again. Another principle is accountability. Share your goals with someone. Track progress publicly or privately. Accountability creates external pressure, which reinforces internal action. Another hidden factor is eliminating excuses. Excuses are the gateway to delay. Identify them, expose them, and replace them with immediate action. Focus on progress, not perfection. Perfectionism delays results. Good enough now, better later is the formula for momentum. Another critical tool is review and reflection. At the end of each day or week, assess what you did. Celebrate progress. Adjust for mistakes. Reinforce patterns that work. Reflection strengthens habits and keeps action aligned with goals. Action is a skill. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Even when uncomfortable, even when uncertain, even when fear appears, you move forward. Over time, acting becomes instinctive. You stop overthinking. You stop hesitating. You stop asking for permission from yourself. The final step is identity reinforcement. See yourself as a person who takes immediate action. Every choice, every task, every effort aligns with that identity. This identity anchors your behavior. When action is automatic, success becomes inevitable. Procrastination fades. Resistance diminishes. Results multiply. The power of action is compounding. Start now. Start small. Start immediately. Repeat. And before long, taking action will no longer be a decision. It will be who you are. And that is the ultimate key to achieving anything.